In the company of my brother Frank, we saw a tall young man standing close by the open gate, looking wistfully the way we came. A closer scrutiny revealed his identity, and I exclaimed with joy, extending both hands to him. "My dear Carol!" He smiled a bright welcome as he extended his hands, but said lovingly, "I so hope my mother joins us soon. She will come to you before long?" "Yes, I know," he answered brightly. "I will be patient. But," he added confidently, "I so want her to see the house I'm building for her." "Will you come and see it?" "Of course I will, gladly." "Now?" "Yes, if I may," looking at my brother for his sanction. He nodded his head pleasantly and said, "That's right, Carol. Have her help you in every way you can. I'll leave her with you. And will you bring her to me later?" "Indeed, yes," said my nephew, and we went away happily together. "Where is this wonderful house, Carol?" "Not very far beyond Mrs. Wickham's," he said. We soon reached it, and I was truly charmed with it in every way. It was fashioned much like my brother Nell's home, and was, like it, built of polished woods. It was only partly finished, and was most artistically done. Although uncompleted, I was struck with the fact that everything was perfect, so far as finished. There was no debris anywhere, no chips, no shavings, no dust. The wood seemed to have been perfectly prepared elsewhere. Where? I have no idea. The pieces were made to fit accurately, like the parts of a great puzzle. It required much skill and artistic taste to properly adjust each to its place. This, my nephew, who even in the earthly life was quite a mechanical genius, seemed to have no difficulty in doing, and the house was slowly growing into beauty and symmetry. After showing me all over the house, he at last drew aside the hangings before an entrance, beyond which were 2 rooms, not only entirely finished, but beautifully furnished as well. I finished and furnished these rooms complete, so that if my mother came before the house was ready, she could occupy them at once. You know, there was no noise from workmen here, no hammering, or unwelcome sounds. I thought at once of the Temple of Jerusalem, where, during its erection, there was neither a hammer or axe, nor any tool of iron heard in the house. "It is very beautiful, my dear boy," I said enthusiastically. It will give her great joy to know that you did it for her." "But what is this, a fireplace?" Pausing before a lovely open chimney, wherein wood was piled ready to be lighted. "Is it ever cold enough for fires here?" "It's never cold," he answered, "but the fire here never sends out unneeded warmth. We have its cheer and beauty and glow, without any of its discomforts. You remember my mother loves to sit by an open fire, so I have arranged this for her." "It is charming. But did you not make the stained glass windows also?" "No, I have a friend who has been taught that art, and we exchanged work. He helps me with the windows, and I in turn help him with his fine woodwork and inlaying. I'm going to make a flower room for my mother similar to yours, only of lilies and violets, which will retain their perfume always." "How lovely!" "I want to thank you, Carol, for you share in our flower room. It is the most exquisite work I ever saw, and it is doubly so when I remember whose hands fashioned it." "It was a labor of love with us all," he said simply. "That is what enhances its beauty for me," I said. "But sit here by me now. Tell me about yourself. Do you spend all of your time at this delightful work? Oh, no, indeed. Perhaps what we used to call 2 or 3 hours daily, much of my time is still spent with my grandfather. I did not know what I should have done when I first came here, but for him. I was so ignorant about this life, and came so suddenly. Yes, dear boy, I know, I said sympathetically. He met me at the very entrance, and took me at once to home, where he and Grandma did everything possible to instruct and help me. But I was, and am still, far below what I ought to be. I would go back to the old life for an entire year, if I only could go to my old friends, or better into every Sunday school in the world, and beseech the girls and boys to try to understand and profit by the instruction there received. Why, I used to go to Sunday school, Sunday after Sunday, help sing the hymns and read the lesson, and listen to all that was said, and I really enjoyed every moment of that time. Sometimes I would feel great longing for a better life, but there seemed to be no one to especially guide or help me. The greater part of the time, what I heard one Sunday was never once spoken of or even thought of until another Sunday came, so that the impression made was very transient. Why do not boys and girls talk more together about what they hear at Sunday school? We were all ready enough to talk about a show of any kind after it was over, but seldom of the Sunday school when together socially. Why do not teachers take more interest in the daily lives of their scholars? Why is there so little really helpful talk in ordinary home life? Oh, I wish I could go back and tell them this. His face beamed with enthusiasm as he talked, and I too wished it might be possible for him to do that, as he desired. But alas, they will not be persuaded, even if one arise from the dead, I thought. It is now time for me to go with my grandfather, he said, rising. But we will talk and walk as far as your home. And you will let me often see you, will you not? Gladly, I answered, as we set forth. We still conversed of many things as we walked, and when we parted at the door, I said, I am soon to learn how to weave lovely draperies. Then I can help you, when you are ready for them. That will make my work more delightful still, was his reply, as he hastened on in the direction of my father's home. As time passed, and I grew more accustomed to the heavenly life around me, I found its loveliness unfolded to me like the slow opening of a rare flower. Delightful surprises met me at every turn. Now a dear friend, from whom I had parted years ago in the earth life, would come unexpectedly upon me with cordial greeting. Now one, perhaps on earth greatly admired, but from whom I had held aloof, from the fear of unwelcome intrusion, would approach me, showing the lovely soul so full of responsive kindness and congenial thought that I could feel a pang of regret for what I had lost. Then the clear revelation of some truth, only partly understood in life, though eagerly sought for, would stand out dear and strong before me, overwhelming me with its luster and perhaps showing the close tie linking the earth life with the divine. But the most wonderful to me was the occasional meeting with someone whom I had never hoped to meet over there, who, with eager handclasp and tearful eyes, would pour forth his earnest thanks for some helpful word, some solemn warning, or even some stern rebuke that had turned him, all unknown to myself, from the paths of sin into the life everlasting. Oh, the joy to me of such a revelation! Oh, the regret that my earth life had not been more full of such work for eternity. My first impulse daily on arousing from happy, blissful rest was to hasten to the river of life and plunge into its wonderful waters, so refreshing, so invigorating, so inspiring. With a heart full of thanksgiving lips, and lips full of joyful praise, morning after morning, sometimes in company with my brother, sometimes alone, I hastened thither, returning always, full of new life and hope and purpose, to our home, where for a time each day I listened to the entrancing revelations and instructions of my brother. One morning, soon after my return from my first visit to earth, as I was on the way to the river, my voice joined to the wonderful anthem of praise everywhere sounding. I saw a lovely young girl approaching me swiftly with outstretched arms. "Dear, dear Aunt Bertha," she called as she drew me near. "Do you not know me?" "My little May," I cried, gathering the dainty creature into my arms. "Where did you spring from so suddenly, dear? Let me look at you again," holding her a moment at arm's length, only to draw her again tenderly to me. "You have grown so beautifully, my child. I may say, I am sure you were always lovely, and you are simply radiant now. Is it this divine life?" "Yes," she said modestly and sweetly, "but most of all, that being near the Savior so much." "Ah, yes, that is it, being near Him. That will make any being radiant and beautiful," I said. "He is so good to me, so generous and so tender. He seems to forget how little I have done to deserve His care. He knows you love Him, dear heart. That means everything to Him." "Love Him? Oh, if loving Him deserves reward, I am sure I ought to have every wish of my heart. For I love Him 1,000-fold better than anything in earth or heaven. I would die for Him." The sweet face grew surpassingly radiant and beautiful as she talked, and I began to dimly understand the wonderful power of Christ among the redeemed in heaven. This dear child, so lovely in all mortal graces, so full of earth's keenest enjoyments during the whole of her brief life, pure and good, as we count goodness below, yet seemingly too absorbed in life's gaieties to think deeply of the things she yet in her heart revered and honored. Now, in this blessed life, counted the privilege of loving Christ, of being near Him beyond every other joy. And how that love refined and beautified the giver. As a great earthly love always shines through the face and elevates the whole character of the one who loves, so this divine love uplifts and glorifies the giver until not only the face, but the entire person radiates the glory that fills the heart. "Come with me to the river, May," I said presently, after we had talked together for some time. "Come with me for a delightful plunge." "Gladly," she said. "But have you ever been to the lake or sea?" "The lake or sea?" I echoed. "No, indeed. Are there lake and sea here?" "Certainly there are," said May, with a little pardonable pride, that she should know more of the heavenly surroundings than I. "Shall we go to the lake today and leave the sea for another day? Which shall it be?" "Let it be the lake today," I said. So, turning in an entirely different direction from the path that led to the river, we walked joyously on, still talking as we went. So much to ask, so much to recall, so much to look forward to with joy. Once she turned to me and asked quickly, "When is my Uncle Will coming?" My hand closed tightly over hers, and a sob almost rose in my throat, though I answered calmly, "That is in God's hands alone. We may not question." "Yes, I know. His will is always right. But I so long to see my dear uncle again, and to long is not to repine." She had grown so womanly, so wise, this child of tender years, since we parted, that it was a joy to talk with her. I told her of my sad errand to earth and the sorrow of the dear ones I had left. Yes, yes, I know it all, she whispered, with her soft arms about me. But it will not be long to wait. They will come soon. It never seems long to wait for anything here. There's always so much to keep one busy. So many pleasures and duties, so many joys. Oh, it will not be long. Thus she cheered and comforted me as we walked through the ever-varying and always perfect landscape. At length she cried, lifting her arm and pointing with her rosy finger, "Behold, is it not divinely beautiful?" I caught my breath, then stopped abruptly and covered my face with my hands to shield my eyes from the glorified scene. No wonder my brother had not sooner brought me to this place. I was scarcely yet spiritually strong enough to look upon it. When again I slowly lifted my head, May was standing like one entranced. The golden morning light rested upon her face, and mingling with the radiance that had birth within, almost transfigured her. Even she, so long an inhabitant here, had not yet grown accustomed to its glory. "Look, darling auntie, it is God's will that you should see," she said softly, not once turning her eyes away from the scene before her. "He let me be the one to show you the glory of this place." I turned and looked, like one but half awakened. Before us spread a lake as smooth as glass, but flooded with a golden glory, caught from the heavens that made it like a sea of molten gold. The blossom and fruit-bearing trees grew down to its very border in many places, and far, far away across its shining waters arose the domes and spires of what seemed to be a mighty city. Many people were resting upon its flowery banks, and on the surface of the water were boats and wonderful structures, filled with happy souls and propelled by an unseen power. Little children as well as grown persons were floating upon or swimming in the water, as well as we looked, a band of singing cherubs floating high overhead drifted across the lake, their baby voices borne to us where we stood, in notes of joyful praise. "Come," said May, seizing my hand, "let us join them." And we hastened onward. "Glory and honor," sang the child voices, "dominion and power," caught up and answered the voices of the vast multitude together. In the strain I found that May and I were joining. The cherub band floated onward, and away in the distance we caught the faint melody of their sweet voices and the stronger cadence of the response from those waiting below. We stood upon the margin of the lake, and my cheeks were tear-bowed, and my eyes dim with emotion. I felt weak as a little child, but oh, what rapture, what joy unspeakable filled and overmastered me. Was I dreaming? Or was this indeed but another phase of the immortal life? May slipped her arm about my neck and whispered, "Dearest, come, after the rapture, rest." I yielded to her passively. I could not do otherwise. She led me into the water, down, down into its crystal depths. And when it seemed to me we must be hundreds of feet beneath the surface, she threw herself prostrate and bade me to do the same. I did so, and immediately we began to slowly rise. Presently I found that we were no longer rose, but were slowly floating in mid-current, and many feet still beneath the surface. Then appeared to me a marvel. Look, where I would, perfect prismatic rays surrounding me. I seemed to be resting in the heart of a prism, in such vivid yet delicate coloring mortal eyes never tasted upon. Instead of the 7 colors as we see them here, the colors blended in such rare gradation of shades as to make the rays seem almost infinite. Or they really were so. I could not decide which. As I lay watching this marvelous panorama, for the colors deepened and faded like the lights of the aurora borealis, I was attracted by the sound of a distant music. Although May and I no longer clung together, we did not drift apart, as one would naturally suppose we might, but lay within easy speaking distance of each other, although few words were spoken by either of us. The silence seemed too sacred to be lightly broken. We lay upon, or rather within, the water as upon the softest couch. It required no effort whatever to keep ourselves afloat. The gentle undulation of the waves soothed and rested us. When the distant music arrested my attention, I turned and looked at May. She smiled back at me and did not speak. Presently, I caught the words, "Glory and honor, dominion and power," and I knew it was still the cherub choir, although they must now be many miles distant. Then the soft tones of a bell, a silver bell with a silver tongue, fell on my ear. And the last notes died away, and I whispered, "Tell me, May." "Yes, dear, I will." "The waters of this lake catch the light in a most marvelous manner. As you have seen, a wiser head than mine must tell you why. They also transmit musical sounds, only musical sounds, for a great distance." The song was evidently from the distant shore of the lake. "And the bell?" "That is the bell which in the city across the lake calls to certain duties at this hour." "There never was a sweeter call to duty," I said. "Yes, its notes are beautiful. Hark! Now it rings a chime." We lay and listened. As we listened, a sweet spell wrapped me round, and I slept peacefully as a child on its mother's bosom. I awoke with a strange sense of invigoration and strength. It was a feeling wholly dissimilar to that experienced during a bath in the river, yet I cannot explain how. May said, "One takes away the last of the earth life, and one prepares for the life upon which we enter. The other fills us to overflowing with a draught from the celestial life itself." And I think the child was right. When we emerged from the water, we found the banks of the lake almost deserted, everyone having gone at the call of the bell to the happy duties of the hour. Groups of children still played around in the joyous freedom. Some climbed the trees that overhung the water with the agility of squirrels and dropped with happy shouts of laughter into the lake, floating around upon its surface like immense and beautiful water lilies or lotus flowers. No fear of harm or danger, no dread of ill or anxiety lest a mishap occur. Security and joy and peace. This is indeed the blessed life, I said as we stood watching the sports of the happy children. I often think how we were taught to believe that heaven was where we would wear crowns of gold and stand with harps always in our hands, or our crowns of gold are the halos his blessed presence cast about us, and we do not need harps to accentuate our songs of praise. We do see the crowns, and we do hear the angelic harps, when and as God wills it. But our best worship is to do his blessed will, said May, as we turned to go. You are wise in the lore of heaven, my child, I answered. How happy I am to learn from one so dear. Tell me about your life here. So as we walked, she told me the history of her years in heaven, her duties, her joys, her friends, her home, with all the old-time freedom. I found her home was distant from our own, far beyond the spires of the great city across the lake, but she added, "What is distance in heaven? We come and we go at will. We feel no fatigue, no haste, experience no delays. It is blessed, blessed." Not far from our home, we saw a group of children playing upon the grass, and in their midst was a beautiful great dog, over which they were rolling and tumbling with the greatest of freedom. As we approached, he broke away from them and came bounding to meet us, and crouched and fawned at my feet with every gesture of glad welcome. "Do you not know him, Auntie?" May asked brightly. "It is dear old Sport," I cried, stooping and placing my arms about his neck, resting my head on his silken hair. "Dear old fellow, how happy I am to have you here." He responded to my caresses with every expression of delight, and May laughed at our mutual joy. I have often wondered if I should not someday find him here. He surely deserves a happy life for his faithfulness and devotion in the other life. His intelligence and fidelity were far above those of many human beings, whom we count immortal. Did he not sacrifice his life for our little Will? Yes, he attempted to cross the track in front of an approaching train because he saw it would pass between him and his little master, and feared he was in danger. It cost his life. He always placed himself between any of us and threatened danger. But Will, he seemed to consider his especial charge. He was a gallant fellow. He deserves immortality. "Dear, dear old Sport, you shall never leave me again," I said, caressing him fondly. At this, he sprang to his feet, barking joyously, and gamboled and frolicked before us the rest of the way home. Then lay down on the doorstep with an upward glance and a wag of his bushy tail, as though to say, "See how I take you at your word?" "He understands every word," said May. "Of course he does. He only lacks speech to make him perfect. I somehow hoped he might find it here." "He would not be half so interesting if he could talk," said May. "Possibly not. How silken and beautiful his long hair is. He has his bath in the river every day, and it leaves its mark on him also. Do you know, I think of the sweetest proofs we have of the Father's loving care for us we so often find in this life, the things which give us such great happiness below. The more unexpected this is, the greater joy it brings. I remember once seeing a beautiful little girl enter heaven, the very first to come of a large, affectionate family. I afterward learned that the sorrowful cry of her mother's was, 'Oh, if only we had someone there to meet her, to care for her.' She came lovingly, nestled in the Master's own arms. And a little later, he sat, still caressing and talking to her, a remarkably fine Angora kitten, of which the child had been very fond, and had sickened and died weeks before to her great sorrow, came running across the grass and sprang directly into her arms, where it lay contently. Such a glad cry as she recognized her little favorite, such a hugging and kissing as the kitten had received, made joy even in heaven. Who but our loving Father would have thought of such comfort for a little child? She had evidently been a timid child, but now, as the children gathered about her with the delightful freedom they always manifest in the presence of the beloved Master, she, looking up confidently into the tender eyes above her, began to shyly tell of the marvelous intelligence of her dumb pet, until at last Jesus left her contentedly playing among the flowers with the little companions who had gathered about her. Our Father never forgets us, but provides pleasures and comforts for us all, according to our individual needs. When shall I behold the Savior? When shall I meet face to face him whom my soul loves? My hungry heart began to cry out in its depths. May, as though understanding the silent cry, placed both arms about my neck, looked tenderly into my eyes and whispered, "You, too, dearest, will see him soon. He never delays when the time is ripe for his coming. It will not be long. You, too, will see him soon." So we parted, each to the duties of the hour. The following morning, my brother said to me, after an interesting hour of instruction, "Shall we go for the promised visit to Mrs. Wickham now?" "Indeed, yes," I answered eagerly. So we at once set forth. We soon reached her lovely home and found her waiting at the entrance as though expecting us. After a cordial greeting to our friend, my brother said, "I will leave you together for that long talk for which I know you are both eager, and will go my way to other duties. I will find you later on at home." The last remark to me. "All right," I answered. "I am familiar with the way now, and need no attendance." After he had gone, my friend took me all over her lovely home, showing me with great pleasure the rooms prepared for each beloved member of her earthly household still to come. One very large room, into whose open windows at each end of the blossom and fruit-laden boughs of the immortal trees looked invitingly, was evidently her especial care. She whispered to me, "Douglas always did like a large room. I'm sure he will like this one." And I was also sure. Returning down the broad stairway, we found it entered into a very large music room with broad galleries supported by marble columns running across three sides of it on a level with the second floor. In its gallery was a number of musical instruments, harps, viols, and some unlike any instruments I had ever seen. The room itself was filled with easy chairs, couches, window seats, where listeners could rest and hear the sweet harmonies from the galleries. "My daughter," my friend explained, "who left us in early childhood, has received a fine musical training here, and is fond of gathering in her young friends and giving us quite often a musical treat. You know our old home of Springsville has furnished some rare voices for the heavenly choirs. Mary Alice, Will Griggs, and many others you will often hear in this room, I trust." We re-entered from this room the dainty reception hall, opening up the front veranda and outer steps. Here, Mrs. Wickham drew me to a seat beside her and said, "Now tell me everything of the dear home and all its blessed inmates." Holding each other's hands as we talked, she questioning and I answering, things too sacred to be repeated here, we dwelt upon for hours. At last she said, raising hastily, "I will leave you for a while. Nay, you must not go," as I would have risen. "There is much yet to be said. Wait here. I will return." Had I already learned not to question the judgment of these wiser friends, and yielded to her will. As she passed through the doorway to the inner house, I saw a stranger at the front entrance and arose to meet him. He was tall and commanding in form, with a face of ineffable sweetness and beauty, Where had I seen him before? Surely I had met him since I came. Ah, now I know. I thought, it is St. John the Beloved, disciple. He had been pointing out to me one morning by the riverside. Peace be unto this house, was his salutation as he entered. How his voice stirred and thrilled. No wonder the master loved him, with that voice and that face. Enter, thou art a welcome guest. Enter, and I will call the mistress, I said, as I approached to bid him welcome. Nay, call her not. She knows that I'm here. She will return, he said. Sit a while beside me, he continued. As he saw that I still stood after I had seen him seated, he arose and led me to a seat near him, and like a child, I did as I was bidden, still watching, always watching, the wonderful face before me. You have but lately come, he said. Yes, I am here but a short time, so short that I know not how to reckon time as you count it here, I answered. Ah, that matters little, he said with a great gentle smile. Many cling always to the old reckoning and the earth language. It is a link between the two lives. We would not have it otherwise. How does the change impress you? How do you find life here? Ah, I said, if they could only know. I never fully understood till now the meaning of that sublime passage. Eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. It is indeed past human conception. I spoke with deep feeling. For them that love him? Do you believe that all Christians truly love him? He asked. Do you think they love the Father for the gift of the Son, and the Son because of the Father's love and mercy? Or is their worship oftentimes of duty rather than love? He spoke reflectively and gently. Oh, I said, you who so well know the beloved Master, who were so loved by him, how can you doubt the love he must inspire in all hearts who seek to know him? A radiant glow overspread the wonderful face which he lifted, looking directly at me. The mist rolled away from before his eyes, and I knew him. With a low cry of joy and adoration, I threw myself at his feet. Bathing them with happy tears, he gently stroked my bowed head for a moment, then rising, lifted me to his side. My Savior, my King, I whispered, clinging closely to him. Yes, and elder brother and friend, he added, wiping away tenderly the tears stealing from beneath my closed eyelids. Yes, yes, the chiefest among 10,000. And altogether lovely, again I whispered. Ah, now you begin to meet the conditions of the new life. Like many another, the changing of faith to sight with you has engendered a little shrinking, a little fear. That is all wrong. Have you forgotten the promise? I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am you may be also. If you loved me when you could not see me except by faith, love me more now, when we have really become co-heirs of the Father. Come to me with all that perplexes or gladdens. Come to the elder brother always, waiting to receive you with joy. Then he drew me to a seat, and conversed with me long and earnestly, unfolding many of the mysteries of the divine life. I hung upon his words. I drank in the very tone of his voice. I watched eagerly every line of the beloved's face. And I was exalted, uplifted, upborne, beyond the power of words to express. At length, with a divine smile, he arose. "We will often meet," he said, and I, bending over, pressed my lips reverently to the hand still clasping my own. Then, laying his hands a moment in blessing upon my bowed head, he passed noiselessly and swiftly from the house. As I stood watching the Savior's fast receding figure passing beneath the flower-laden trees, I saw two beautiful young girls approaching the way he went. With arms intertwining they came, happily conversing together, sweet Mary Bates and May Camden. When they saw the Master, with glad cry they flew to meet him. And as he joyously extended a hand to each, they turned and each clinging to his hand, one upon either side accompanied him on his way, looking up trustingly into his face as he talked with them, and apparently conversing with him with happy freedom. I saw his face from time to time in profile as he turned and looked down lovingly, first upon one, then the other, lovely upturned face, and I thought, that is the way he would have us be with him, really as children with a beloved elder brother. I watched them till the trees hid them from my sight, longing to gather the dear girls to my heart, but knowing his presence was to them then more than aught else. Then I turned and passed softly through the house to the beautiful entrance at the rear. Just before I reached the door, I met my friend, Mrs. Wickham. Before I could speak, she said, "I know all about it. Do not try to speak. I know your heart is full. I will see you very soon. There, go." She pushed me gently out the door. How my heart blessed her, for indeed it seemed sacrilege to try and talk on ordinary topics after this blessed experience. I did not follow the walk, but kept across the flowery turf, beneath the trees, till I reached home. I found my brother sitting upon the veranda, and as I ascended the steps, he rose to meet me. When he looked into my face, he took both hands into his for an instant, and simply said, very gently, "Ah, I see, you have been with the Master," and stepped aside, almost reverently for me to enter the house. I hastened to my room, and dropping the draperies behind me at the door, I threw myself upon the couch, and with closed eyes lived over every instant I had spent with that hallowed presence. I recalled every word and tone of the Saviour's voice, and fastened the instructions he had given me indelibly upon my memory. I seemed to have been lifted to a higher plane of existence, to have drunk deeper draughts from the fountain of all that is good, since I had met him whom my soul loved. It was a long blessed communion that I held thus with my own soul on that hallowed day. When I looked upon the pictured face above me, I wondered that I had not once recognized the Christ. The likeness was so perfect, but I concluded that for some wise purpose my eyes were holden, until it was his pleasure that I should see him as he is. When at last I arose, the soft golden twilight was about me, and I knelt by my couch to offer my first prayer in heaven. Up to this time in my life there, I had been in constant thanksgiving. There had seemed to be no room for petition. Now as I knelt, all I could utter over and over was, "I thank you, blessed Father, I thank you, I thank you." When I at last descended the stairs, I found my brother standing in the great flower room, and going to him, I said softly, "Frank, what do you do in heaven when you want to pray?" "We praise," he answered. "Then let us praise now," I said. And standing there with clasped hands, we lifted up our hearts and voices in a hymn of praise to God, my brother with his clear, strong voice leading, and I following. As the first notes sounded, I thought the roof echoed them. But I soon found that other voices blended with ours. The whole house seemed filled with unseen singers. Such a grand hymn of praise earth never heard. And as the hymn went on, I recognized many dear voices from the past. Will Griggs' tenor, Mary Alice' exquisite soprano, and many other voice that wakened memories of long ago. Then as I heard sweet child voices and looked up, I saw above us such a cloud of radiant baby faces as flooded my heart with joy. The room seemed filled with them. Oh, what a life! What a divine life! I whispered, as after standing until the last lingering note had died away, my brother and I returned to the veranda and sat in the golden twilight. You are only in the first pages of this record, he said. Its blessedness must be gradually unfolded to us, or we could not, even here, bear its dazzling glory. Then followed an hour of hallowed intercourse, when he led my soul still deeper into the mysteries of the glorious life upon which I had now entered. He taught me. I listened. Sometimes I questioned, but rarely. I was content to take of the heavenly manna as it was given me, with a heart full of gratitude and love. The next day, my brother being away on an important mission, I started out alone to see if I might not find the dear young friends of whom I had caught a fleeting glimpse the day before. I knew that all things were ordered right in that happy world, and that sooner or later I should find them yet again. I could but hope it might be very soon. I recalled the happy light upon their fresh young faces as they had met me and as they had met the beloved master, and I longed to talk with them of their life from day to day. From thinking of them, I began to think of my blessed interview with him, and became so absorbed in these thoughts that I was even oblivious to the beautiful world around me. Suddenly I heard someone say, "Surely that's Mrs. Spragg." And looking up, I saw sweet Mary Bates a few steps away, regarding me intently. I cried joyfully, "My precious Mamie!" She flew to me, and folding me in her arms, drew my head into her shoulder in the old caressing way, almost sobbing in her great joy. "Dear, dear mother," a pet name often used by her in the happy past, "how glad I am to have you here. I could scarcely wait to find you." "How did you know I was here, Mamie?" "The master told me," she said softly. May had already told me, and we were on the way to find you when we met him, and he told us he had just left you. Then we knew we must wait a little, she said reverently. How my heart thrilled. He had thought about, had spoken of me after we parted? I longed to ask her what he had said, but I dared not. Seeming to divine my thoughts, she continued, "He spoke so tenderly about you, and said we must be with you much. May had work to do today, and as she had already seen you once, I came alone. She may be here later on. May I stay a long time with you? There is so much to tell you, so much to talk about." "Indeed, you may. I had started out to find you when we met. Come, dear child, let us return home at once." So, clinging to each other, we set out toward my home. "What shall I tell you first?" I asked. "Everything about the dear ones, every individual member of our beloved household. Begin with my precious heartbroken mother." Here, her voice broke a little, but she continued, "I am with her often. but her great, and I fear unreconciled, sorrow keeps me from being the comfort to her I long to be. If only she could spend 1 hour with me here, could know God's wisdom and love as we know it, how the cloud would lift from her life, how she could see that the two lives, after all, but are one. Yes, dear, I answered. I always urged her to think of that and trust in the implicity in the Father's tender care and never failing love. But it is difficult for us to see beyond the lonely hearthstone in the vacant chair. Still, I believe she does begin to dimly grasp the comfort you are so eager to impart. Ah, if only she knew that I need just that to complete my happiness now. We cannot sorrow here as we did on earth because we have learned to know that the will of the Father is always tender and wise. But even heaven can never be complete for me while I know that my precious mother is forgetful of her many rare blessings, simply because I may not be with her in the flesh to share them. There is my father and the boys. Why, I am truly hers, still as they are. I often sit with them all, with her hand in mine, or my arms out to her, my little dear mother. Why must she see me to recognize this? But this is almost complaining, is it not? Some day she will know all. We must be patient. As we walked on slowly, conversing of the earth life, still in many phases so dear to us, she asking eager questions, I answering as best as I could, we saw a group of 4 persons, 3 women and a man, standing under the trees a little to one side of the walk. The man's back was towards us, but we at once recognized the master. The women were all strangers, and one of them seemed to have just arrived. Her hand the Savior held as he talked with her a while. All were intently listening to his words. We regarded the group in silence as we passed, not hoping for recognition from him at such a time. But just as we were opposite to them, he turned and looked upon us. He did not speak, but oh, that look, so full of tenderness and encouragement and benediction. It lifted us. It bore us upward. It enthralled. It exalted us. And as we passed onward, the clasp of our hands tightened, and rapture unspeakable flooded our hearts. We finished our walk in silence, and sat down on the marble steps in that shadow of the overhanging trees. The dear child nestled close against my side, and laid her head upon my shoulder, while I rested my neck caressingly upon it. After a time I whispered, half to myself, was there ever such a look? Instantly she raised her head and looking at me said eagerly, You think so too? I was sure you would. It is always just so. If he is too much engaged to speak to you at a time, he just looks at you, and it is as though he had talked a long while with you. Isn't it wonderful? Why could we not know him on earth as we know him here? How long were you here before you met him? I asked. Oh, that is the wonderful part of it. He was the first face I looked upon after I left the body. I felt bewildered when I first realized that I was free, and I stood for a moment irresolute. Then I saw him standing just beside me, with that same look on his face. At first I felt timid and half afraid. Then he stretched forth his hand to me and said gently, My child, I have come to take care of you. Trust me and do not be afraid. Then I knew him instantly. All fear left me. I clung to him as I would have done to either of my brothers. He did not say much to me, but somehow I felt that he understood all of my thoughts. After a moment I asked, May I not remain a while with Mama She is heartbroken. Yes, dear child, as long as you desire, he answered compassionately. Will you also remain? I asked, for I already felt I could not bear to have him leave me. He looked much pleased, as though he divined my thought, and answered, Yes, I will never leave you, till you are ready to accompany me. Then I went to Mamma, and put my arms about her, and presently the master, too, came and whispered words of comfort to her. But I'm not sure she recognized our presence, though I fancied that she grew more calm beneath my caresses. We stayed till all was over. I never felt Mamma in an instant, except that twice I stole to poor little Hal's sick room when he was for a short time alone. I've always felt that he recognized my presence more than any of them. He lay so still and calm when I talked to him. He seemed to be listening. When they gathered for the last time about my casket, it seemed to me I must speak. I must show myself to them. Could they for one instant have seen my living self standing so calmly in their midst? They would have turned forever from the lifeless clay that they embalmed and beautified for the tomb. They would have known that I was not there. But they would not recognize the truth. At last I pleaded with the master to let me show myself once to them, but he said, It is not the Father's will. After that, I accepted fully the Father's will, and soon thereafter he brought me here into his arms. And what a blessed life it is. I can give only a brief outline of our conversation. On that first happy day, it is too sacred to be scanned by curious eyes. We talked until the golden twilight fell, and we watched the little birds nestling in the vines and heard afar the solemnly joyous notes of the angels' choral song and joined our voices in the hymn of praise. Later we went to my room and lay down upon my dainty couch for a rest, and the last words I heard before sinking into heaven's blissful sleep were tenderly whispered, Dear, dear little mother, I am so glad and happy you are here. More than once the question has been asked, Was there night there? Emphatically no. What, for want of a better designation, we may call day, was full of glorious radiance, a rose golden light, which was everywhere. There is no language known to mortals that can describe the marvelous glory. It flooded the sky, and it was caught up and reflected in the waters. It filled all heaven with joy and all hearts with song. After a period much longer than our longest earthly day, this glory mellowed and softened until it became a glowing twilight full of peace. The children ceased their playing beneath the trees. The little birds nestled among the vines, and all who had been busy in the various ways throughout the day sought rest and quiet. But there was no darkness, no dusky shadows, even only a restful softening of the glory.